There is a photograph from April 11th, 1996, taken inside St. John's Church in Toorak, Melbourne. And if you look at it long enough, the whole story lives inside that single frame. A woman in a wedding dress, 40 years old, composed and clear-eyed, standing beside a man who is 27, visibly nervous, and radiating the kind of uncomplicated certainty that only people who have not yet been tested by life can carry so easily. Deborra-Lee Furness had already won the Australian Film Critics Circle Best Actress Award for her 1988 film Shame by that day. She had trained at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York, worked on American television, come back to Australia with a reputation built entirely on her own work, and arrived on the set of the 1995 television series Corelli as the established name. Hugh Jackman arrived as the newcomer, with his drama school diploma still fresh and no professional credits to his name. And yet she looked at him across that gap, knowing everything it would cost her, and chose him anyway. 27 years later, on a Monday in June 2025, that choice reached its legal conclusion when their divorce was finalized. Within months of that finalization, the man who had spent nearly 3 decades calling her the love of his life was reportedly planning a wedding with Sutton Foster, his Broadway co-star from The Music Man revival. And when sources close to Deborah were asked what it felt like to watch Hugh Jackman and Sutton Foster moving through the world together so publicly, the answer arrived in 5 words that contained an entire marriage worth of meaning. A real kick in the teeth. To understand the full weight of those 5 words, the story has to start in Melbourne in 1995, on a television set where 2 people met under circumstances that neither of them had planned for. Deborra-Lee Furness walked onto the Corelli set as a working actress with more than a decade of serious credits behind her. Hugh Jackman walked on as a prisoner, literally, playing a character in his first professional role after graduating from drama school. She played the psychologist assigned to work with him. The attraction on his side came fast, and he talked about it openly for years afterward, describing the exact moment she removed her sunglasses and introduced herself as the moment he knew. Her response was considerably more measured. 13 years separated them in age, and Deborah had been in the industry long enough to understand precisely what that gap would invite from the outside world. The comments and the predictions, and the particular cruelty reserved for women who love younger men in public. She tried to end the relationship before it fully took hold, telling Hugh directly that the age difference made it unworkable, that he should think carefully about what he was asking her to step into. Hugh Jackman, 25 years old, with nothing to offer her except complete and unshakable certainty, refused to accept any of that reasoning. None of it mattered to him. She was the one. 4 months after they met, he proposed. On April 11th, 1996, they got married, and the people who had warned her that it would not last watched and waited. What those people watched instead was something genuinely rare inside the entertainment industry, a marriage that appeared by every public measure across 2.5 decades to be working. Hugh Jackman went from that Melbourne television set to becoming Wolverine in the X-Men franchise, to hosting the Academy Awards, to collecting standing ovations on Broadway, to earning paychecks north of $100 million. And through every single stage of that transformation, Deborra-Lee Furness stood beside him without visible resentment or competition. She was there before the fame existed. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 2021, Hugh posted their old wedding photographs with a caption describing her as his destiny from nearly the moment they met, writing that their love had only grown deeper across those 25 years, that being married to her felt as natural as breathing. A woman reads words like that 25 years into a marriage, and she does not hold them at a distance and test them for sincerity. She builds her life around them. She makes real decisions based on them, moving across hemispheres, turning down professional opportunities, structuring the entire shape of her existence around the shared understanding that the person making those declarations means every word. The marriage carried private weight that the public version never fully reflected. Deborah and Hugh spent years trying to have biological children, going through IVF, living inside that cycle of injections and waiting, and hope that contracts and expands with each attempt. The miscarriages came, more than one, each its own private grief the outside world never witnessed directly. Hugh spoke about those losses publicly at various points. Deborah did not, carrying that pain the way women of her generation were often taught to carry the unbearable, quietly, and without making anyone else uncomfortable with the full extent of what she was feeling. When the biological path closed, adoption opened. Oscar arrived in 2000, Ava in 2005, and Deborah did not stop at becoming a mother privately. She became a public advocate for adoption reform in Australia, working to change legislation and reduce the stigma around adoptive families, taking private grief and converting it into something that could help other people. For 20 years, the Jackman marriage functioned as proof that lasting love inside Hollywood was possible. They appeared at events and on red carpets looking entirely like two people genuinely glad to occupy the same space. Hugh gave interview after interview, crediting Deborah with grounding him through the relentless pressure of global fame, with being the foundation that made everything else stable. She was not the celebrity wife standing quietly in the background. She was the reason the whole structure held together. That changed in February 2022, when Hugh Jackman began rehearsals for the Broadway revival of The Music Man alongside Sutton Foster. The production ran for nearly a full year before closing in January 2023. During those months, multiple sources and subsequent reporting by outlets, including Us Weekly, indicated that the relationship developing backstage became what insiders described as Broadway's worst-kept secret. Cast members reportedly witnessed extended embraces between Hugh and Sutton that went beyond typical co-star warmth. Sutton herself gave interviews describing their nightly pre-show ritual, a routine of unhurried conversation before every performance, in terms that carried a warmth considerably beyond professional courtesy. Whether what developed between them constituted a physical affair during the marriage, or lived in the more ambiguous space between deep emotional intimacy and outright betrayal, is something only the two of them can answer. What sources close to Deborah have made clear is that she believes something had fundamentally shifted, that an emotional affair had taken root, and that for a woman who had poured 27 years of absolute trust into one person, the distinction between emotional and physical betrayal offered very little practical comfort. April 2023 brought a public anniversary tribute from Hugh to Deborah on social media. 1 month later, they appeared together at the Met Gala, photographed side by side, looking entirely as they always had. And then, 4 months after that, on September 15, 2023, the joint statement landed. The marriage built across almost 3 decades got reduced to language that sounded less like the ending of a marriage and more like the conclusion of a corporate restructuring. A wonderful, loving marriage, the statement read, a journey shifting, a mutual decision to pursue individual growth. 2 words carefully chosen to sound considered and civilized, deployed to explain the dissolution of something that had required 27 years to construct. Deborra-Lee Furness said almost nothing publicly for the better part of 2 years after that statement. A brief appearance at a screening for her film Force of Nature, The Dry 2 in May 2024, brought one reporter's question about what the previous year had taught her, and her answer arrived in 5 words: that she was strong and resilient. Not a celebration of new beginnings, not a performance of recovered optimism, a plain statement of survival from a woman who had decided that 5 words were entirely sufficient to say everything she intended. Meanwhile, Hugh Jackman and Sutton Foster moved steadily from tabloid speculation into full public visibility. October 2024 brought Sutton's filing for divorce from her husband of 10 years, screenwriter Ted Griffin. January 2025 brought photographs of Hugh and Sutton holding hands in Los Angeles, confirming officially what had been whispered about for 2 years. By spring of that year, entertainment outlets were reporting that Hugh had proposed to Sutton during a New Year's vacation in Costa Rica at the end of 2025, sharing news of the engagement with friends even before Sutton's divorce from Ted Griffin had been finalized. Additional reporting indicated that despite a fortune estimated at $387 million, accumulated largely during his marriage to Deborah, Hugh reportedly had no intention of signing a prenuptial agreement before marrying Sutton. Reports also described a small private ceremony being planned in New York, with Ryan Reynolds set to serve as best man. Sutton Foster is 49 years old. Deborra-Lee Furness is 70. What that age gap feels like in this context is not jealousy in the conventional sense. It is the specific and quiet devastation of understanding that all those years of loyalty and sacrifice and showing up daily without complaint could be set aside not because someone better came along, but simply because someone newer did. On May 23, 2025, Deborah filed for divorce, and this time it was not a joint filing. Not another mutual statement with carefully managed language. Hers, alone, filed unilaterally. 4 days later, she released a statement to the Daily Mail, and the language could not have been further from the polished register of the September 2023 announcement. Her heart and compassion, she wrote, went out to everyone who had endured the traumatic journey of betrayal. A profound wound, she called it, one that cuts deep. After nearly 2 years of composed public restraint, the word she selected was not disappointment, not sadness, not loss. Betrayal, chosen deliberately by a woman who weighs her words and understood exactly what she was saying and to whom. The divorce finalized in early June 2025, with assets estimated at $387 million divided between them, covering properties in Manhattan, the Hamptons, Australia, and England. 2 days before filing, Deborah had paid $1.7 million to acquire their Manhattan penthouse outright in her name alone. She was not leaving that marriage without something that belonged entirely and inarguably to her. Now there is a book. Multiple outlets have reported serious publisher interest in a memoir from Deborra-Lee Furness, with what has been described as a genuine bidding situation among major publishing houses. Sources indicate she maintained what insiders call a divorce diary throughout the separation period, and that she intends to stand up for herself in her own words. Hugh reportedly hoped she would decline the offers. She has not. People connected to Hugh and Sutton have reportedly characterized the potential memoir as being produced out of spite, which requires a fairly specific kind of audacity to apply to a woman who said almost nothing publicly for 2 years, while her husband's new relationship played out in tabloid coverage everywhere. A woman who raised 2 children with that man, endured multiple miscarriages beside him, relocated across the world for his career, and ultimately received a joint statement about individual growth, while he was, by every available indication, already well on his way out the door. If Deborra-Lee Furness writes that memoir, it will not be spite. It will be because she spent 27 years building a story alongside someone who changed the ending without consulting her. The least she is owed is the chance to tell her side in her own voice. In 1996, she was the one with the credentials, the career, the reputation. Hugh Jackman was the newcomer with potential and nothing else yet realized. She married down by every conventional entertainment industry standard and spent 27 years standing beside a man as the scales shifted until he had become one of the most recognized faces on the planet. She supported his fame completely and consistently. She was the stable ground beneath a career that expanded far beyond anything either of them could have anticipated on that Melbourne television set in 1995. People told her at the very beginning that he would leave once he became successful, that a man with his looks and his ambition and the full eventual weight of Hollywood's attention could not remain permanently with a woman 13 years his senior. She proved them wrong for 27 years, and then on a quiet Monday morning in June 2025, she stopped proving them wrong. Deborra-Lee Furness is 70 years old, living in a Manhattan penthouse she purchased herself, with children who are now adults and photographers who have largely moved on to the newer version of the story. What she sits with now is the knowledge that arrives only from having done everything right, from having been loyal and patient and present through every difficult season, and finding that, in the end, it was not sufficient. Not because anything she did was wrong, but because the person she had trusted completely decided, somewhere between those Broadway rehearsals and that Costa Rica proposal, that he wanted to build something different with someone else. Deborra-Lee Furness did not lose a husband. She lost the argument she had been winning for 27 years. And if that is not a real kick in the teeth, nothing is.